Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Brachos Daf Nun Aleph, where 4 lines from the top says the Gemara, Bo minei me'Rav Chisda. The Bnei Yeshiva asked the following question from Rav Chisda. What will be the halacha in this situation of me she'achal v'shasa, one who has already begun eating and drinking, and he realized, oops, v'loi birech, and he has not yet made a bracha prior to the onset of the meal. Ma'u sheyachsa v'yivarech. Can he go ahead now and make the bracha on the food before he continues to eat? Or is it too late, since he missed the opportunity? Amar Lahu, Rav Chisda responded, certainly, he's meant to make a bracha right now before he continues eating. And he responded with a mashal, with an analogy. Mi she'achal shum. If an individual ate a clove of garlic, and he incurred a foul breath, a bad smelling breath as a result, should he then go and eat another piece of garlic, so that he gets more bad smell? Certainly not. Why would he add? Just because he committed an offense once, is he meant to go add to it? Here too, in our case, just because he missed the opportunity, the ideal time of making a bracha, which is prior to the onset of the meal, does that mean that he shouldn't make a bracha any longer? Certainly, he's meant to make a bracha now, prior to resumption of his meal. Amar Ravina, says Ravina, if so, hilkach. So what follows is that afilu gomar sudasa, even if one completely finished his meal, and he realized that he hasn't made a bracha yet, yachsa v'yivarech, he's meant to make a bracha now, and this bracha will be applied retroactively to the meal that he already ate. The Sanya, as we find a similar concept in a brisa, this is regarding the bracha that one recites upon fulfilling a mitzvah. We're speaking about the mitzvah of immersion in the mikveh. It says the brisa tava, he already immersed in the mikveh, he was tava v'ala, and he came up, oimer bal yasai. So when he comes up, he says, Baruch Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu ala tvila. So he makes a bracha on account of Hashem sanctifying us with His mitzvahs and commanded us to immerse in the mikveh. Rashi says it's speaking about a Bal Keri who was Tovel. So he was Tameh beforehand, and he was Tovel for his Tumah. Taisa says it's speaking about a Ger, a convert. He's being Tovel as part of the conversion process. So the bracha there is recited after the Tefillah, since certainly in these cases, he's not able to make the bracha before Tefillah. If he's a Bal Keri, he can't make bracha, he can't say brachos. If he's a Ger, he certainly can't make a bracha, since before Tefillah he's still a non-Jew. So we see a similar concept, that one makes a bracha even after the fact, even after the mitzvah. Here too, says Ravina, even after the meal, he can make a bracha and have it applied to the meal that he has already eaten. Says Rav, we can't compare the two matters. There's a big difference. Hasam over there by the Tvila. You know why he makes the bracha afterwards? Because mi'ikara, initially, gaver lechazi, prior to being table, the person was unfit to make a bracha. Therefore, his proper time for reciting the bracha is afterwards. Hacha, but in our case of food and drink, mi'ikara, gaver chazi, initially the person was able to make the bracha. Ideally, he should have made the bracha prior to partaking in the food, and therefore, since he was able to do so, and he neglected to do so, since he was pushed away, he missed the opportunity, he missed it, and he cannot make it up any longer. So there's a difference between the case where a person is simply unfit to make the bracha at that point, so he must wait until he's able to make the bracha, and that is the time, that is the appropriate time for his bracha. However, in the case of food and drink, the appropriate time is prior to eating. But once he's finished his meal, he can't make a bracha any longer. Tosfos points out that on account of the Tvila of a Ger, where he's unable to make the bracha prior to Tvila, therefore the Chacham will mesaken all across the board regarding every Tvila that a person is Tovel, the bracha will be recited after the Tvila. A similar thing Tosfos says regarding the Netilas Yadayim. The bracha there is also recited afterwards on account of the case where a person has his hands unclean. He's coming from a Beis HaKisei, Tosfos says, and he can't make a bracha prior to washing. He needs to wait till afterwards. Therefore, the Chacham will mesaken all across the board that the bracha of Netilas Yadayim is recited after washing one's hands when they're clean. and he's certainly able to make the bracha. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabban, we learned in a brisa. Asparagus, yafal alev. Asparagus was this beverage that they would drink, an alcoholic beverage they would drink in the morning on an empty stomach, and it had a therapeutic purpose. So the brisa teaches us that asparagus is good for the heart, it's good for the eyes, and certainly it is helpful, beneficial to one's intestines. One who takes this on a regular basis, it's beneficial for one's entire body. But one becomes intoxicated from it, he overdoes it. It is harmful for his entire body. Says the Gemara, from the fact that the brisa says that this beverage is good for the heart, Mechlal, apparently, what type of asparagus are we speaking about? And they made two different types of recipes, one that contained in its ingredients and contained pure wine, or there was one that contained beer. So which one are we speaking about? Says the Gemara, from the fact that the brisa says that the asparagus is good for the heart, Mechlal, apparently we're speaking about the asparagus that contains the chamra skin, that contains the wine, which is good for the heart, as the Gemara will explain later. If so, and we say that certainly it's good for the intestines. And we learned the brisa otherwise. The brisa says that asparagus, which contains wine, is good lila'at yafa. It's good for la'at. La'at is an acronym or shetevas of leiv, ayin, tchil, heart, eye, and spleen. It's good for these items. But it's not good. It's harmful for ramat, which is the roish, the head, mi'ayim, the intestines, and tachtoinis, which are hemorrhoids. So we see that asparagus containing wine is actually not good for the intestines. Says Gemara, Kitanya hibi miyushan. The brisa that says that asparagus containing wine is good for the intestines, speaking of miyushan, that it contains aged wine. Because it's not, as we find a Mishnah, which indicates that aged wine is beneficial for one's intestines. One makes a vow, wine will be like a carbon to me, I will not taste wine. Why? Because wine is harmful for the intestines. Therefore I make a vow to refrain from drinking wine. They responded to him, 1 second, aged wine is actually good for the intestines. And he remained silent. He accepted it. So the conclusion is that asur b'chadash, he is prohibited in partaking in new wine, but old wine, aged wine, that he can't drink, since that wasn't included in his neder. He never had the intention of including the wine, since he acknowledged these people's response. When they pointed it out to him, he acknowledged it, and he establishes his vow, his neder, on the account of the fact that wine harms the intestines. As he said, I'm refraining from wine because it hurts me, it hurts the intestines. So apparently he only means wine that has that detrimental effect. And certainly he didn't mean also this aged wine, which is actually good for the intestines. Shmamina, we see from here clearly that aged wine is beneficial for the Bnei Me'ayim. That explains why the asparagus that contains the aged wine is also good for the intestines. Rashi says, Miyushan, aged wine means Shal Gimel Shanim, it's in its third year. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brachos, Shisha Dvarim Nemer B'Asparagus. There are 6 things said regarding this beverage asparagus. Number 1, Ein Shois Noisai Ela K'Shur Chai. We're only meant to drink it when it contains the wine in its pure form, undiluted. Umale. And we're meant to drink it in a full cup. A full cup. When it's full to the top. Mekabla b'yamin. You accept it with your right hand. V'shesei b'smal, but drink it with your left hand. So he accepts it with his right, and he drinks it with his left. He's not meant to speak out after drinking this asparagus. We don't interrupt during drinking. Rashi says we drink it in one shot, and we don't return the cup only to that person that actually handed it to him. And he's meant to spit afterwards. And since this is an alcoholic beverage which is drunk on the empty stomach, we're meant to supplement it. We're meant to supplement it with some food. What type of food? With the same kind of food. So if we're speaking about asparagus that contains beer made from dates, so we're meant to eat dates. fig beer, meant to eat figs. Says the Gemara, Tanya, haven't we learned? Meant to supplement it only with bread. Like kasha, it's not difficult. It depends what type of asparagus. The one that contains shichra, contains beer, we're meant to supplement it with the same kind of food. If it's date beer, dates. If it's fig beer, figs. But if it's asparagus that is made from chamra, contains the wine, then in that case we want to supplement it only with bread. Says the Brachos Tani Chada, as the Brachos we mentioned earlier, Lilat Yafe, it is beneficial for lat, leiv, ayin, and tchol. Liramat, kosher, it's harmful for these items, roish, me'ayim, and tachtonis. Vitani, that we have a Brachos which says just the opposite, that the asparagus is liramat yafe, it's good for ramat, lilat kosher, but for lat it's no good. How do we reconcile this? Like kash, it's not difficult. It depends what type of asparagus. Haba the chamra, haba the shichra. Asparagus that contains wine, in that case it is yafe, lilat yafe, liramat kosher. The asparagus that contains beer instead of wine, in that case it is liramat yafe and lilat kosher. Tanichad, we have one Brachos which says rok achrav loike. If one spits after drinking this asparagus, it harms him. It's no good. He's not meant to do it. But Tanya, another Brachos says lo rok achrav loike. If he doesn't spit, then he's harmed. He's meant to spit. Like kasha, it's not difficult. But the chamra of the shichra, that if it's asparagus that contains the chamra, the wine, in that case he should not spit. If it's the asparagus with the beer, then he should. Amar Bashi, hasha the amras. Now that you say loik rok achrav loike, that if he doesn't spit afterwards, it harms him. If so, meimav nizrokin afilu ufnei hamelech. The saliva that gathers, he's meant to spit it out even when he's standing before a king, and not meant to endanger himself by withholding the roik, or withholding the saliva. Omar Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, Shloisha dvarim, sachli surreal sarapnim. Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, he ascended to heaven by uttering the Shem Hashem. He was Olel Rakia, as the Brachos teaches us. Rashi brings a Brachos in Maaseh Merkava. So he went up to heaven, and he had a conversation with a very prominent malach, Surreal Sarapnim, a very important, prominent malach who had access to Hashem. So again, Omar Bishma ben Elisha, Shloisha dvarim, sachli, three things. Sachli Surreal Sarapnim. This conversation took place when he went up to Shemayim. Three things he told me. Number one, al titoil chalucha shachris miyad hashamash v'tilbash. Don't take your clothing from the shamash, from the butler, in the morning. Don't take it from him and wear it. Rather, take it yourself from where it's lying. V'al titol yadecha mishlei not al yadav. Don't have your hands washed by one his hands were not washed. And the third thing was al tachzir. Asparagus, don't return the empty cup after you drink the asparagus. Don't return it only to the person who actually handed it to you. Why? Because this group of shadim, of demons, some say is stalganis, this group of angels of affliction, they look out for the person, they wait. And they say, when will a person finally come to one of these things, will stumble on these things? When would somebody stumble with one of these things, and he'll be ensnared, and we can go ahead and harm him? So be careful with these three items. Amar Shumalevi, Shloisha dvarim, three things. Sachli malach hamaves. The malach hamaves told me, al tiltol chalucha shachris. In the morning, don't take your clothing miyad hashamash or tilbash from the butler and wear it. V'al tiltol yadecha v'mi shaloi not al yadav. Don't have your hands washed by one who hasn't yet washed his hands. And finally, v'al tamoid lifnei anoshim. Don't stand in front of the women b'shah shechoyzos min hameis when they're returning from the funeral. Why? What's so terrible? Mipnei, says the Malach HaMaves, because I'll tell you a secret. Shani mirakit, because I dance. And I come before them, before the women. V'charbi biyadi, and I have a sword in my hand. V'yeshli rishus, I was granted permission. Lechabel, to hurt and destroy. Says the Gemara, v'yipaga ma'takante. If a person encounters these women in that situation, what is his remedy? Linchef miduchte arba amis. He should jump out of his place 4 amis. Ika naharef, there's a river that la'avri, he should pass to the other side. Vika dakachunef, there's another path. Lezelba, go over to that path. Vika gudaf, there's a fence. Leiku achura, he should go behind. Leiku achura, stand behind the fence. V'loi, but if none of these options are present, lihadar api, he should turn away his face from the women and say, v'leiman, say as follows. V'yoyimar Hashem ala Satan, Hashem said to the Satan, Yigar b'cha ad dechafi minei. Hashem will yell at the Satan. So this is a way of doing away with the danger of the situation. So you should say this pasuk ad dechafi minei until they pass through. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Zeir Amar Vo. V'amri some say Masnisatan. We went in a brayso. Asara Dvar. There are 10 halachas, 10 things said regarding Namru b'Kais of Bracha, regarding the Kais of blessing, the Kais of Bracha, which is the Kais that we recite Brachos Hamazon. There are 10 things to keep in mind. Number 1, to own hadacha ushtifa. It requires being washed and being rinsed. Taisa says this is only when there's a concern that it's dirty. So we're meant to wash it and rinse it. The Gemara soon says that hadacha means inside, shtifa means outside. Rinse it from the inside and from the outside. Chai, it's meant to be pure, undiluted wine. Umale, filled to the brim. V'itur, it's meant to be crowned. V'ituf, and it requires wrapping oneself, covering oneself. Noitle b'shtayad, you meant to take it with both hands, to display your chavivus, your dearness. V'noisne b'imin, and then bring it over to your right hand, which is the ikar, which is the chashav hand. Umagbiyah min hakarka tefach, you meant to lift it off the off the ground, the tefach, when you're sitting on the ground, or off the table of tefach when you're sitting by a table. V'noisne einav, but you meant to keep your eyes focused on it. V'yish oimim, some say, one more item, af mishagrei matan al anshe beis. One is meant to send it as a gift to anshe beis, to the members of his household, to his wife. He's meant to send it to her so she can partake and drink from the kosher bracha. Rabbi Yochanan, we only do 4 things. Our custom is only to apply 4 of these things: hadacha and shtifa, chai and mali. Washing inside, rinsing the outside, the undiluted wine, and to have it filled to the top. Tosfos points out that even Rabbi Yochanan is actually a 5th one, as the Gemara later will say that Rabbi Yochanan seems also to have the custom of holding it in the right hand. So we have a total of 5 according to Rabbi Yochanan, but the other ones we don't do. Tosfos actually says that yesh lahachmer, it is actually preferred to be machmer with all these items, as we find that the Amoraim were indeed meticulous with all these different halachas. Says the Gemara, Tana, hadacha mibefnim ushtiva v'chutz. Now we're going to explain all these different instructions. Tana, we're going to the Brachos. Hadacha means mibefnim, wash it from the inside. Ushtifa, shtifa is referring to rinsing it from the outside. Machutz. Amar b'yach. Kol mevarech al koshel malei. One who makes the bracha of koshel bracha on a full cup. What does he merit? Noisin loy nachla b'mitzarim. They give him an inheritance without boundaries, limitless. Shenemar umalei birchas Hashem. When it is filled for the bracha of Hashem, Yom v'Darim Yerusha. Yom, which is west, Darim is to the south, Yerusha, you will inherit. So the pasuk doesn't delineate any boundaries. Apparently, when one fills his cup and recites a bracha with fullness, he merits a nachla b'li mitzar without any boundaries. Rabbi Yosef Rechnina Omer, he's zeicha to inherit 2 worlds. Which 2 worlds? This world and the next. Tosfos says the remez is learned from the fact that the word Yerusha, you will inherit, has an extra, seems to have an extra yud and hey, because it could have merely said Yom v'Darim Rosh. Why say Yerusha? The yud and the hey are indicative, are remez to the 2 worlds, as we know. Tosfos brings a Gemara in Menachos that this world was created with a hey, and the next world with yud. So the yud and the hey are remes to one being Noichel both worlds. Continues the Gemara to explain what are those items mentioned in regard to Kosher Bracha. What is Itur, crowning? Rabbi Yehuda ma'atreu b'talmidim. Rabbi Yehuda would crown the Kosher Bracha by having his students surround him while he was holding Kosher Bracha. They would surround him, they would encircle him like a crown, and this would be a display of respect for the Kosher Bracha. Rav Sheshes ma'atreu b'natli, he would crown it with, surrounded with cups of wine. Continues the Gemara, and we have a girsa from some Rishonim that take out Amar of Chanan. And the Gemara continues, Ubachai, what does it mean? Bachai, undiluted wine. Now there's actually a question here. How can the Gemara tell us that one is meant to use undiluted wine for Kosher Bracha? Haven't we learned yesterday on Daf Nun Amud Beis that all agree that for a Kosher Bracha one is meant to use diluted wine, which is superior, which is considered to be a higher quality beverage, rather than merely using undiluted, sharp wine, which is barely drinkable. So that's why Rav Sheshes comes and tells us, Amar Rav Sheshes, or Birchas Haaretz, that this is meant to be until Birchas Haaretz. Meaning certainly, one requires diluted wine for Kosher Bracha. When we speak over here about using Chai, pure wine, undiluted wine, that is only until Birchas Haaretz, until the second Bracha of Birchas Hamazon. Explains the Rush, what is the significance of diluting it at that point? We are indicating that the wine of Eretz Yisrael is so chashav, so significant, is so highly concentrated and so sharp and undrinkable until it's diluted. So therefore it is appropriate to dilute this wine right at the point when one is going to recite the bracha, which praises Eretz Yisrael, which thanks Hashem on account of Eretz Yisrael. Therefore says Rav Sheshes, or Birchas Haaretz, and some say Girsa ad Birchas Haaretz. He's meant to keep it pure, undiluted until Birchas Haaretz. At that point, dilute it and continue your Birchas Hamazon. Continues more. What is ituf? What is an example of wrapping, covering oneself? Rav Papa Ma'atef Yosef, he will wrap himself in his talis and his cloak and recite Birchas Hamazon in that manner. Rav Asi Poris Sudal Reishi, he would spread a sudra, some sort of a scarf on his head. That was his manner of ituf by Birchas Hamazon by Kosher Bracha. Continues the Gemara, Noitli b'shtei yodav, he's meant to take with both hands and then pass it to his right hand. What do we find this in the pasuk? Su'u yidechem kodesh u'barchas Hashem. Lift your hands in sanctity and bless Hashem. So yidechem is plural, both hands. He's meant to take the cup with both hands. And then certainly pass it over to his right, because the right is the mochashav, is the ikar hand, most significant hand. Place it in your right hand when you actually recite the Birchas Hamazon. The early ones would ask the following question: can the left hand go ahead and help the right hand, assist the right hand? He says, for example, if it's a heavy cup or a long Birchas Hamazon. Since the first one, the early ones, had this question, but they did not have a resolution as to whether this is allowed. Can one support his right hand by using his left hand to be samich? And therefore, anan, certainly we, na'avad l'chumra, we will be stringent and not use our left hand to support our right during the bracha. Continues the Gemara, is meant to lift it off a tefach. What do we find? A pasuk that indicates this idea. I will lift up the cup of salvation b'shem Hashem ekra, and call on the name of Hashem. So when to lift it up, Farshim say that one of the reasons is so that the assemblage pays attention. He lifts it so that they notice it and they pay attention to it. Continues the Gemara, one is meant to concentrate, to focus, put his eyes on it. Why? What is the reason for that? So his mind doesn't wander from it, that he maintains his concentration. And certainly, it's good to maintain concentration during Birchas Hamazon. He's meant to send it as a gift, as an elegant gift to his wife. This is so that his wife becomes blessed on account of this. So, in conclusion, regarding the Kosher Bracha, The Brachos says we have 10 things. Some say an 11th. Number 1, hadacha, which means washing it from the inside. Number 2, shtifa, rinsing it from the outside. Chai, it's meant to be undiluted up until birchas haaretz. Itur, it's meant to be crowned with students, with cups of wine, as each Amora did. It is meant to be filled to the top, and we learned that from the pasuk of a molei birchas Hashem. Ituf, one is meant to wrap himself, as one Amora was ma'ativ b'talisa, the other spread a scarf on his head. We're meant to take it with both hands. We learn from the pasuk Su Yadeichem Kodesh. It also shows chavivus, an endearment to the mitzvah. He's meant to pass it over to his right hand, which is the ikar hand. Meant to lift it off a tefach, as we learn from Kois Shois Esa. And he's meant to focus on it so that he maintains his concentration and doesn't wander. Some say he's meant to send it to his wife so that she will receive a bracha on account of this. The Gemara tells us that Rav Nachman says our custom is only to be careful with a couple of these items, 4, or as a 5th. And Tosfos concludes that one is meant to try to cover all of them. And indeed, in Shulchan Aruch, it is brought down that one is meant to cover as many of these as possible. Hadacha, shtifa, chai. Chai doesn't apply to us because that was only regarding the sharp wine in Eretz Yisrael. But malei, a full cup, etc. Continues the Gemara with this story. Ula ikla levei Rav Nachman. Ula came to visit Rav Nachman, and he had a meal. Karuch rifta, he had a meal of bread. Parich berachas mezoina. So Ula made berachas hamazain with a kosher bracha. Yorvle kasa the berachas of Nachman. So he passed over, after berachas hamazain, he passed over the kos to Rav Nachman so he can partake in the kosher bracha. Hamli Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman turns to Ula and he said, Lishader mar. Mar, meaning Ula should send the kos. Lishader mar kasa the berachas al Yalta. You should also send it to my wife, to Yalta, so that she can partake in the kosher bracha as well. Amalei, so Ula responded to him, no, it's not necessary. Why? Hachem Rav Yochanan. This is what Rav Yochanan said. A pribitna shel isha misbarich. The fruit of the belly, the offspring of the woman, only gets a bracha. Ela mi pribitna shel ish. Only on account of the bracha to the offspring of the man, meaning the bracha of the man extends over to the woman as well. Therefore, once you drink from the kosher bracha, it's not necessary to send it to her separately. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Ubeirach pribit necha, Hashem will bless your offspring. It says pribit necha, yours, speaking to the man. It doesn't say pribit na, hers. Pribit na, leinemar. Ella pribit necha, speaking to the man. So apparently, the bracha begins with him, and by extension, it will carry over and spill over to the woman as well. Tanya Mihacher, we learned a brisa in support of this. How do we know? She'ein pribitna shel isha mizbarech. Only elo pribitna shel isha. And as it says, oberach pribitnacha, pribitna leinemar. Doesn't say pribitna, elo rather pribitnacha to the man. So the bracha is meant to be focused. Begins with the man, is rooted with the man, and then carries over by extension to his wife as well. Adahachi, while this conversation was going on, Shoma Yalta, Yalta, Rav Nachman's wife overheard that they weren't going to send it to her. Kama Bazir, she got up in anger, but also the Bechamer, she went up to the storage room of a tavern, she broke Dalad Meya Dani de Chamra, she broke 400 barrels of wine in protest and anger. Only Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman wanted to appease her, to emphasize her. So he told Ula, Nishadala Mar Kosachrina. Okay, send her another kais in lieu, instead of the kosher bracha. Shalachla. So Ula sent her another cup of wine. And he said, Shalachla, Kol Hai Nagba de Birchasi, Kol Hai Nagba. Even this Nagba, this cup, this kais, is also it's like kosher bracha. Perhaps it was coming from the same barrel. So this is also considered to be kosher bracha. Drink it. Kol Hai Nagba de Birchasi. So she didn't buy it. She responded and she said, Mili, from those peddlers that travel around the cities, Mili, we have idle words, meaningless words. From old rags, Kalmi, we have lice. They produce lice, meaning these are meaningless words. I know the truth. This is not kosher bracha. Okay, continues the Gemara. Omar Vas Ein Masichan al Koshel Bracha. We have another two items regarding Koshel Bracha. We're not meant to speak out on Koshel Bracha. Rashi says is referring to from the point when Misha Achsay, when he holds on to the kais, up until Brachos Hamazon, and certainly during Brachos Hamazon he can't speak out. So Ein Masich, we're not meant to speak out a Koshel Bracha. But Ravasi, one final stipulation regarding Koshel Bracha, Ein Mevarchen al Koshel Paranos. We're not meant to make a bracha on a Koshel Bracha which contains wine, which is a Koshel Paranis of tragedy. So what does this mean? My Koshel Paranis? Omar of Nachmar Yitzchak, Kosheni. A Koshel Paranis, a kais that could harm, is referring to the second kais. One is not meant to eat or drink in pairs, as he may incur the wrath of the effect of the shadim, of the demons that could harm one when he eats in pairs. This doesn't really apply today. So in the case where the Koshel Bracha is the second in the series, that is a Kosheni, it is a pair, it can invite harm and is considered to be a Koshel Paranis. And one is not meant to use that for Brachos Hamazon, for Koshel Bracha. Tanya Mihachi, Ha'sheisek Kalayim, one who drinks double, Lo Yevarech, he should not make the Brachos Hamazon on this kais, as it says, Hiko in the Chras Al Kecha Yisrael, prepare yourself properly before Hashem. This is not a properly prepared kais. This is recklessness. He's not preparing himself properly, and therefore he's not meant to use it for Brachos Hamazon. So in conclusion, in addition to these 10 stipulations that mentioned earlier, we have another 2. One is Ein Masichen. One is not meant to interrupt with words after he already receives he takes hold of the Koshel Bracha, and finally, we're not meant to make a Koshel Bracha on a Kosheni, since it can incur the wrath of the Shadim, and that is not in compliance with the pasuk of Hichain, prepare yourself properly, Kras Al Kecha Yisrael. Amar Avov, Amar Lasisa Tana. Some say it was a brayso which says as follows: one who eats his bread while he's walking. So how should he recite his Brachos Hamazon? When it comes to reciting Brachos Hamazon, he should stand still in one place. This enhances his concentration, his kavanah. So one is meant to raise his concentration to a higher notch when he makes his Brachos Hamazon. So instead of merely walking, stop, stand still in one place and bench. If one has conducted his meal standing up, in that case he's meant to raise it a notch further. Sit down to raise your level of concentration even a notch higher. If one ate his meal reclining, then he sits up erect, which is proper for Brachos Hamazon. However, the final conclusion is Bekulu, in any manner of eating, whether he was walking, standing, or reclining, Yoshev Mevarach is meant to sit straight up and recite Brachos Hamazon with the proper posture, proper respect, proper concentration. Tosfos says because Brachos Hamazon is midaraisa, therefore we're more machmer, are required to be sitting and reciting Brachos Hamazon in that manner. Hajan Allah Shloisha Shachal. Continues the Mishnah, Elu Dvarim. The following are items, are matters, shebein beishamai ubein beis besuda, that are matters of dispute between Beishamai and Hillel regarding matters pertaining to Hilchos Seuda, to a meal. Beishamai, number 1, mevorach al hayom v'acham mevorach al yain. This is regarding Kiddush on Shabbos and Yontif. Kiddush consists of 2 brachas. One is the bracha hagafen on the wine, al hayayin. It also contains a bracha on the yain, which describes the glory of the day, the kedusha of the day. Which is meant to go first? It says Beishamai mevorach al hayom, first the bracha on the day, and then va'achar kach mevorach al yain. Beis Hillel says just the opposite. Beis Hillel mevorach al hayayin, first hagafen, and then va'achar kach mevorach al yain. The next machlokes, Beishamai oimim noitin lo yadayim, one is meant to wash his hands for the Suda. Then afterwards, they pour on the wine. So he washes his hand for the meal, and then he has his wine poured. B'Salam, just the opposite. First, they pour the wine, and afterwards, they wash their hands. The Gemara will explain the background, the reasoning behind all these machlekes. Continues the Mishnah, another item of machlekes. One who wipes his hands from Netilas Yadayim, he wipes it in a cloth and a towel, manichal shulchan, and then places it on the table so they can continue using it during the meal to wipe his hands. Don't place it on the table, place it on the cushion. This is regarding Mayim Achronim. One is meant to sweep away the remnants of the food from the bayis, from the room, whether if they ate over the floor, then they should sweep the floor. Whether it was on the table, then they should clean up the table prior to netilat yadayim, prior to mayim achronim. Ubesilam, just the opposite. First netilat yadayim, first mayim achronim, and then v'acham chabad sabayis, afterwards they sweep away the remnants of the food. This is regarding if one has but one cup of wine on Matzah Shabbos. So wait for Havdalah until he finishes eating, and at that point he can use the same Koshel Yain for Brachos HaMazon, for Koshel Bracha, and Havdalah as well. So now we have a question of the sequence, once again, between Beisham and Basil. We have the Brachos of Havdalah, which contain Ner, Bracha on the flame, to commemorate Adam HaRishon's creation of a fire on Matzah Shabbos. We have Besamim, fragrances which we make a bracha on Matzah Shabbos to reinvigorate ourselves on account of the fact that the Neshama Yisrael left us. We have the bracha of Havdalah, and then we have Mazon, Brachos HaMazon. So we have a series of 4 brachas. What is the proper sequence? We have a machlekes. First comes Ner, first on the flame, then Mazon, Brachos HaMazon, then Besamim, and then Havdalah. We recite it in this manner. We take the kais of wine and we recite the brachas in this sequence. First comes Ner, then Besamim, then Mazon, then Havdalah. Now regarding the bracha on the flame, what is the proper formulation? Hashem created the ma'or, the illumination of the fire. Hashem creates the various illuminations of the fire. Continues the Mishnah. One is not meant to make a bracha. One is not meant to make a bracha on these items of a guy. That we use for a mace, for a dead person. One does not make a bracha on the flame on Matzah Shabbos until he benefits from its light. Continues the Mishnah. One who has eaten and forgot to make the bracha at the place where he had his meal and already carried over to a different location, is required to go back or not? He has to go back to the first location to make Brachos HaMazon. He may make a bracha in his current location. Continues the Mishnah. Until what point? How much time can elapse between the meal and Brachos HaMazon until the food gets digested in his intestines? Continues the Mishnah. If wine arrives to them after they finish their meal, before Brachos HaMazon, of course. So now the question is, what does he do? How does he proceed? If they only have one cup of wine, he makes a bracha on the wine, he could drink it. And then makes Brachos HaMazon without the wine. No. Basil says, he makes a bracha first, Brachos HaMazon, with the wine, with the kosher bracha, and only then concludes the Gemara with one Mishnah with one halach. If one hears merely the ending of a bracha, part of the bracha of a Yisrael that is making a bracha, so he hears a part of the bracha, he knows what he's making the bracha on, and he knows that he concluded the bracha, he can recite, he can say the Amen, respond with an Amen. That is only regarding Yisrael. But not when it is the kusi that is making the bracha. So once again, if one hears merely the ending of a bracha recited by Yisrael, that is sufficient to allow him to respond with Amen. But a kusi, these are the groups of people that came to Yisrael and converted, and their gerus was questionable, and there was a question regarding their adherence of mitzvahs, and we know that they didn't accept the rabbinical interpretation of the Torah, and therefore there was always a suspicion of whether the fact that they indeed are making their brachos to Har Grizim, to the Avodah Zarah that they had placed on Har Grizim. So regarding a kusi that makes a bracha, we were concerned that perhaps the bracha was directed not to Hashem, and one cannot respond with an Amen until he hears the entire bracha. that it contains a reference to Hashem and only to Hashem. So in summary, we had several items of machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And what is the opinion of Beis Hillel? So regarding Kiddush, Beis Hillel hold, first comes the Birchas Hayayin, the Hagaf, and then Birchas Hayayin. According to Beis Hillel, we went to be moizgen, pour the wine, and then wash our hands for the meal. We're meant to place the towel on the Kessler, on the cushion, not on the table. Regarding by Machreinim, first you wash, and then you are machabden, you sweep away the remnants of food. In the case where one has merely 1 cup of wine for Brachos Hamazon and Havdalah, what is the proper sequence of the brachos? According to Beis Hillel, first comes Neir, then Besamim, then Mazon, then Havdalah. The proper formulation of the bracha is Boyer Ma'orei Haish. If one finds himself in a different location, he realizes he forgot to make Brachos Hamazon, he may make the bracha Yevarech B'Makom Sheniskar. He can make the bracha right here. And finally, one is meant to make the Brachos Hamazon first, and then the bracha on the wine and drink it. Tana Rabbanan, we learned on the Brisa. Dvarim shebein Beis Shammai uBeis Hillel b'Suda. Items that are in dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding matters of Suda. Beis Shammai regarding Kiddush. Mevarech al hayoim. First he makes the bracha, which refers to the sanctity of the day. Va'achar kach, and then mevarech al hayoim. Why? We have 2 reasons for this. Number 1, shahayoim goyrem l'yayin sheyavai. The day, the requirement to say kedusha, say Kiddush on Shabbos, that is the catalyst that brings the wine. So he is the goyrem. He is the source, and certainly he is meant to precede the Birchas Hayam. Therefore, the Birchas Hayam comes first. Number 2, the second reason, even in the timeline, it works the same way. It became Kaddish. The Kiddush Hayam has already entered. The sanctity of Shabbos has already begun, and the wine has not yet come to the table. So even in the timeline, we see that Kiddush Hayam comes first, and therefore, certainly regarding the sequence of the brachos, the bracha with reference to Kiddush Hayam should precede the bracha of the wine. Beis Hillel, no, just the opposite. Mevarech al hayayin, first make the bracha on the wine, va'achar kach al hayayin. Why? We have a different reason. Shayayin goyim l'kedusha damer. Wine is actually the goyim. He is the catalyst for the kedusha, for the kiddush to be said. If you have no wine, you can't make kiddush. So he is the goyim. And certainly the bracha on the wine is meant to precede. Davar achar, another reason for this. Birchas hayayin tadira. The bracha of agaf on wine is more common, it's more frequent. Birchas hayayin ena tadira. The bracha of kiddush is not as common, it's not so frequent. Since the bracha of agaf on wine is recited by kiddush, by birchas hamazon, by a wedding, sheva brachas. So it's more common than the bracha of yayin, bracha of kiddush. And we know we can apply a general concept. Tadir v'sheinu tadir kaidem. When we have 2 items, a choice between 2 things. One is a tadir, one is more common and frequent, and the other one is she'einu tadir. It is not as common. What comes first? Tadir kaidem. The common one comes first. We learn this from the halacha of the sequence of karbanos. So here too, the bracha of the yayin is meant to precede. And the Gemara concludes v'halacha k'divrei Beis Hillel, that the bracha of the yayin comes first. Says the Gemara, why does Beis Hillel require 2 reasons? Says the Gemara, why? The reason is because perhaps you will say, Beis Shammai provided 2 reasons. We only have 1. Therefore, we have to respond with 2. And therefore, we have another reason, which is Birchas Hayayin Tadira. The Hagafen is more common, and Birchas Hayayin Eina Tadira. Birchas Hayam is not as frequent, and therefore Tadir v'sheinu tadir kaidem. We have 2 reasons to balance out the reasons of Beis Shammai. Says the Gemara, you said v'halacha k'divrei Beis Hillel. Pshita, it's obvious, it's partial, we know. The Hanafka Baska, the heavenly voice came out that we are meant to follow, like Beis Hillel. So why do you need to stipulate that in this case too, halacha is like Beis Hillel? Says the Gemara, if you will say kaidem Baska, this statement, halacha Beis Hillel, was recited before the Baska. Therefore, we need to tell us, yes, the halacha follows like Beis Hillel. Or if you want, I can say la'achar Baska. This statement was said after the heavenly voice came out and told us to follow Beis Hillel. Rabbi Shoi, this statement that halacha Beis Hillel is following the opinion of Rabbi Shoi that says the Amar Ein Mashgichim Baskol. We don't pay heed, attention to Baskol. Therefore, we need to say that halacha in this case is like Beis Hillel. Rabbi Shoi doesn't hold that we're meant to follow a heavenly voice regarding matters halacha in this world. The Torah is leiba shamayim, it's not in heaven. The Torah is given to us in this world, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda didn't pay attention to the Bas Kollel. And we require to say that specifically in this case, yes indeed, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha follows like Beis Hillel, that the bracha of the wine is meant to be said before the bracha of Brachos Hayom.